The university halls with their high ceilings and polished floors were busy with the typical start of term chaos that morning, bustling with students. As I walked through the crowd, focused on the upcoming lecture, I clutched my notes and textbooks close. But just as I rounded the corner, I was taken aback by a sudden collision with someone rushing from the opposite direction. My papers flew from my arms, scattering across the polished floor in a wide arc. "Oh no, I'm so sorry," I exclaimed, my voice trembling with a sudden flood of embarrassment. I dropped to my knees, my face burning to gather the sprawling mess. Across from me, the young man responsible for the collision already helping to collect my papers. He looked up, his expression mingling amusement with concern. "I guess this is one way to meet my new psychology professor," he said, handing me a stack of my notes. Caught off guard by his comment, I felt a flicker of something unexpected and realized who he must be. One of my new students. A whirlwind of emotions engulfed me, the thrill of a new connection, battling with the fear of crossing professional boundaries. This is not right, I thought. I am his professor, I should maintain my distance. Yes, I suppose it is, I replied, attempting to return his smile, my voice betraying the turmoil within. As we stood and exchanged the last of the papers, his gaze held mine, and I noticed the curious intensity of his look. The air around us seemed to crackle with a newfound tension. "I'm William," he introduced himself, his fingers lingering a moment too long on a page before releasing it, the touch sending a shiver down my spine. I couldn't help but notice how his eyes lingered on me, his gaze intense and probing. This is not right, I thought. I am his professor. I should maintain my distance. I couldn't help but notice how his eyes lingered on me, his gaze intense and probing. This is not right, I thought. I am his professor. I should maintain my distance. Dr. Eliza Gilbert. I managed my voice steadier than I felt. I straightened my glasses, a nervous habit, and tried to project an air of professionalism. I hope our next meeting involves less collision and more conventional introductions. It's important to me to maintain a professional relationship with all my students. William chuckled, his laugh resonating with a warmth that momentarily made me forget the professional boundaries I was obligated to maintain. This is not right, I thought. I am his professor. I should maintain my distance. Yet his charm was a formidable adversary to my resolve. I'll make sure to watch where I'm going next time, but I have to admit this makes for a memorable start. Memorable indeed, I echoed, tucking a loose strand of hair behind my ear in a nervous gesture I hoped went unnoticed. We parted then, William heading towards the student lounge and me towards the lecture hall, but the brief encounter lingered stubbornly in my mind. As I walked away, his laughter still reverberating in the corridor, I was caught in anticipation and apprehension about what this semester might hold. The sound of his footsteps echoing in the empty hallway and the scent of freshly polished floors mingling with the faint aroma of coffee from the nearby lounge, all added to the heightened sense of the unknown. I shook my head, trying to dismiss the lingering effect of William's smile. This was uncharted and potentially perilous territory. Exciting yet fraught with the weight of professional and ethical dilemmas. Once I entered the lecture hall, William's words echoed in my mind, hinting at a semester that promised nothing but the ordinary, yet held the potential for something extraordinary. The first day of class always brought a blend of anticipation and routine. As students trickled into the lecture hall, their chatter created a backdrop of first-day nerves and excitement. I organized my notes at the podium, my mind still replaying the morning's unexpected encounter with William. Once I called the class to order, the hall quieted down, filled with the energy of new beginnings. I began with an overview of the course, outlining expectations and objectives with a steady, authoritative voice, a reminder that it was just another semester. Diving into our first discussion on the fundamental theories of human behavior, I encouraged questions and debates to provoke critical thinking. That's when William raised his hand, He sat relaxed yet confident, an enigmatic smile playing at the corners of his lips. Professor Gilbert. He started, his tone respectful yet teasingly challenging, about the theory of cognitive dissonance you mentioned. Isn't there always an exception to the rule? How do we account for individual anomalies in such sweeping theories? His question was legitimate and thoughtfully posed, yet our brief history added a layer of complexity to this simple academic exchange. Our eyes met across the crowded room, and I felt the air thicken, laden with unspoken words and mutual awareness. This is not just a student asking a question, I thought. This is William, the young man who has already unsettled my professional equilibrium. That's an excellent point, William, I managed to say, thankful for the professional exterior my role provided, even as my pulse quickened. Indeed, exceptions challenge and refine our theories, pushing the boundaries of psychological studies. It's the anomalies that often drive scientific progress. The class continued with a flurry of lecture points and student notes. Still, the dynamic between William and me shifted subtly. Infused with an intellectual and emotional tension, I struggled to compartmentalize. As the lecture ended and students began to file out, I lingered at the podium, organizing my papers, to delay the moment when I'd have to face William directly. He approached with a group of friends, but paused as they exited, stopping briefly at my desk. Thank you for the lecture, Professor Gilbert. It was enlightening, he said, the double entendre hanging between us like a shared secret. Thank you, William. I look forward to hearing more of your insights this semester, I replied, maintaining a professional tone while my heart raced with conflicting emotions. He nodded, his expression knowing, then turned to leave. I watched him go, feeling a mix of relief and regret. I should stop this, I thought, before it goes any further. But a part of me couldn't help but wonder, what if? What if we could explore this connection outside the confines of the classroom? As I packed up, I couldn't help but question whether the academic challenge William presented was manageable, or if his personal challenge was a game too risky to play. The routine of office hours had always been a pillar of my teaching philosophy, an opportunity to engage deeply with students and clarify complex theories. However, when William appeared at my office door that Thursday afternoon, his presence promised an interaction far from routine. Professor Gilbert, do you have a moment? William asked, leaning casually against the doorframe, filling the small office space with his presence. Of course, William, come in, I responded, gesturing to the chair across from my desk, my heart fluttering with professional obligation and personal trepidation. He sat, opening his notebook to a page filled with precise notes. I'd appreciate it if you could clarify something from the lecture on behavioral patterns. I'm not quite sure I fully grasped the concept of intrinsic versus extrinsic motivations, he said, his eyes meeting mine with an intensity that seemed to extend beyond academic curiosity. Absolutely, I started gathering my thoughts and focusing on the academic aspect of his question. I explained the differences, using examples and pointing to theories in the textbook. William's attention never wavered, absorbing every word with an unusual focus. As the discussion progressed, it subtly shifted. You're very perceptive, William. It's quite rare, I found myself saying, caught off guard by the ease of our interaction and the intellectual chemistry sparking between us. Thank you, Professor. I find psychology fascinating, especially the way you teach it, he replied, his smile slight but significant. It makes me consider the psychological underpinnings of our everyday decisions, even the simple ones. The air charged as we discussed personal choices and the unseen forces driving them. William shared insights into his observations of people, seamlessly weaving academic theories and personal anecdotes. I found myself unusually engaged, drawn in by his intellect and the person behind the ideas. As the clock ticked on, I realized we had wandered far from the initial academic help he sought. Our discussion had me anchored into areas of mutual interest: art, literature, and philosophy. It seems we have a lot in common, William. I commented almost wistfully. I could feel a thrilling and forbidden connection while trying to avoid the thought of my husband, Carl. Yeah, it does seem that way, he agreed, his voice low. It's refreshing to talk to someone who understands. Our eyes met again, and in that moment the professional boundaries I diligently upheld blurred dangerously. We should probably get back to the topic, shouldn't we? I whispered, desperate to regain some semblance of control. Right, of course, William replied, though he made no move to stand. Neither did I. He finally collected his notebook after a moment that felt too long and too short. Thanks for your help, Professor Gilbert. I really appreciate it. Anytime, William. That's what I'm here for, I managed to say, feeling relieved and disappointed. As he walked out. The following day, I went to my usual quaint local coffee shop. This was my refuge where I could escape the confines of academia and immerse myself in a book, or the simple pleasure of a well-brewed espresso. I intended to dive into a cozy mystery novel I had eagerly anticipated. On this particular day, however, fate seemed to have other plans. As I approached the counter to order, a familiar voice behind me caused my steps to falter. Professor Gilbert, fancy meeting you. Here, William said, his tone light and unmistakably pleased. I turned a smile forming on my lips, despite the sudden tightness in my chest. William, hi, yes, it's my usual spot for a coffee escape. I can see why, he said, glancing around appreciatively. It has a nice vibe. We moved down the line together, discussing the coffee selections before settling at a table with our orders. The casual setting, starkly different from the structured environment of the university, amplified the natural chemistry between us. William was relaxed and charming, his presence vivid and all-consuming. His voice pulled me back as I stirred my coffee, lost in thought. Do you always analyze your coffee before drinking it? Or is it just when you're with a challenging student? He grinned, a teasing light in his eyes. Laughing, I sat down my spoon. It's a habit. I enjoy dissecting things, whether it's coffee or student theories. Our conversation meandered effortlessly from books to music, each topic unveiling new layers of shared interests and intellectual connections. The more we talked, the more I found myself drawn into the warmth of his company, the academic pretext of our relationship fading into the background. William noticed my distracted gaze and followed it to the book, peeking out of my bag. Planning to dive into that cozy mystery next, he asked, nodding toward the novel. I smiled, a bit taken aback by his observation. Yes, it's actually one of my guilty pleasures. My husband Carl once spent an entire weekend buried in a similar book. I suppose it's become a bit of a shared interest. That sounds lovely. It's great to find someone who shares your passions. Right. William's voice was soft and thoughtful, and for a moment I wondered about the implications hidden within his simple observation. Yes, it truly is, I replied, feeling the weight of his gaze and the complexity of our situation. The warmth of our conversation was tinged with the chill of boundaries we were skirting dangerously close to crossing. William, I started, the need to re-establish boundaries pressing against my conscience. We should probably remember that he leaned forward, his expression serious for the first time. That we're professor and student, he finished for me, his voice soft. Yes, I whispered, grateful yet regretful for his understanding. I know, he replied, his eyes holding mine. And I respect that truly. Today was just coffee between two people who enjoy similar things. Nothing more. I nodded, though the flutter in my stomach spoke of conflicting emotions. Thank you, William. I appreciate this, your respect means a lot to me. On the day designated for the mid-semester group project, I circulated around the room, engaging with each group to probe their thought processes and understanding. As I approached William's group, I heard his confident and clear voice explaining a complex theory to his peers. His natural leadership drew the group's and unintentionally my full attention. Why does watching him just talk make me feel like this? I thought, feeling an unexpected twinge of jealousy as he laughed with a female classmate who nodded enthusiastically at his ideas. It was disconcerting, this unprofessional and unwarranted emotional response to his interactions. But my thoughts betrayed me, veering towards the personal. Professor Gilbert. The sound of my own name on his lips snapped me back to reality, and I realized William was addressing me, his eyes seeking approval or feedback on a point he had just made. "I'm sorry, could you repeat that last part?" I asked, mentally berating myself for the lapse. "Of course," William replied, his expression a mix of concern and curiosity. I suggested that unrecognized external support systems might also influence emotional resilience. It's not just the internal fortitude, but also the environment that shapes one's ability to rebound. Absolutely, that's a very insightful point, I responded, grateful for the return to professional dialogue. External factors often play a critical role, sometimes subtly. It's important to consider all angles and psychological assessments. As the group nodded in agreement, diving back into their discussion, I forced myself to move on to the next group, though my mind remained partially tethered to William's words. A few days later, after another charged lecture, the room emptied slowly, and the echoes of the students' discussions about psychological theories gradually faded away. I gathered my notes, my mind still partly on the lecture's content, and partly on my troubling emotional turbulence concerning William. I returned to my office, and just as I thought I was alone, I heard the soft click of the door closing. Looking up, I saw William leaning against it, his expression serious. "Professor Gilbert, we need to talk," he said, his voice low. I tensed, suddenly on alert. "William, everything that needs to be said has been covered in class." He shook his head, stepping closer. "Not about the class, about us." "There is no us, William," I replied sharply, feeling the room walls close in slightly. "Going to do about it?" I felt my resolve waver as the air between us thickened with unspoken words. "There is no we in this scenario, William. Remember that," I said, even as my voice betrayed a hint of uncertainty. William moved closer, his presence overwhelming. "I know you feel it too," he whispered, his eyes searching mine. The professional boundaries I had so meticulously maintained were crumbling under the weight of his gaze. In a moment of weakness, I lost myself in the tension that had been building for weeks. William stepped forward, his hands reaching out, and the space between us vanished in a breath. Before I could fully grasp the implications, William had locked the door, and we were wrapped up in a moment of reckless abandon. Papers and books were swept aside as the desk behind me became an anchor in the storm of our mutual desire. The world outside my office ceased to exist as we gave into the feelings we had denied for so long. It was intense and consuming, a fire that burned all rational thought to ashes. After our moment of passion in the quiet confines of my office, a space that once felt safe and detached from personal entanglements, I sat across from William, both of us still catching our breath. The air was thick with confusion, regret, and unexpected clarity. William broke the silence first, his voice gentle. "Eliza, are you okay?" I hesitated, my thoughts tangled up with emotions. "I'm not sure," I admitted, looking down at my hands, feeling a mix of liberation and fear. "This shouldn't have happened, William, but it did, and it's made me realize something important." He waited, respectful and attentive. "I haven't been happy for a while," I continued, the words feeling heavy yet true as they hung between us. "Not just here, at work, but at home too, with my husband. I've been going through the motions, pretending everything is okay. William nodded, understanding flashing in his eyes. Sometimes it takes something unexpected to show us what we're missing or need to change, he said softly. Yes, exactly, I replied, feeling a slight weight lift with my acknowledgement. What happened here, it was a mistake. But it was also a wake-up call. I must address the issues in my marriage to find out if I can be happy again. Or if it's time to move on. William reached out, his hand brushing mine briefly in support. Whatever you decide to do, ensure it's for your happiness, Eliza. You deserve that much. I nodded, grateful for his words and the unexpected role he had played in my realization. Thank you, William, for everything. We can't continue this. I gestured faintly around the office. But I'm thankful for the part you've played in helping me see things more clearly. As he stood to leave, I knew that while our paths would continue to cross in academic settings, the personal boundary would be firmly re-established. But I will never forget this pivotal moment, which challenged me to confront my unhappiness and spurred me to seek a future where joy could be a constant, not a fleeting moment. I guess sometimes life puts us to the test, right? That was my case. I thank you for listening to me until the end. Now I want to hear from you. Where you are from and what kind of stories you like. I'll read you in the comments.